Hello, everyone. I hope your semester is going good, but you may have a lot of pressure. You know, it's like 7.5 weeks semester. So given that you'll have double pressure compared to the regular semester, and I think you have already accepted these things while you have taken this course. So far, let me show you the summer schedule. I think I haven't put this link to the syllabus, but right now it is here. The course description, you'll see the summer schedule. So for the first week, we have done the chapter 1. I think I have already done the chapter 2 and 3 on last week. And you have already submitted the project 1 and it has already been graded. Thanks to the grader. He has already graded those things very quickly. So this week, you have to complete the chapter 4 and chapter 5A and project 2. So project 2 is related to the project 1, but you have to add the CSS here. I think you have already done the CSS part on module 2 and module 3. So it should have been assigned in the last week, but I have assigned the project this week so that you have ample of time to do your project. So far you have done those basic HTML, basic CSS, and the CSS the positioning and layout. And this week you will be learning the design principles. If you're not aware of any design pattern, so these are the videos and the basic design principle for the non-designer. You can read those things. And the project 3A is a part of this design principle, but this is due on May 31st. So if I go to the calendar, you can see that this Saturday, project 2 is assigned, and next Tuesday, you have to submit this project 3A. But I don't think you have to spend too much time for the project 3A. You have to spend at least 1 to 2 hours to do this project. And let me show you. What you have to do in the project 3A. So you can draw the responsive website using some online tool, or you can use just a paper and pencil to sketch your design. Either way, but I would suggest it should be some like design tool, could be an image or PDF, so it is more easier to read, and you like for a top level view, when a designer or a developer is trying to develop a website, then they can see those design if it is on an image format or you can draw those things through some tool. It is more easier to view and more easier to implement. So I would suggest to use any design tool. Otherwise, you can just take a photo of your paper while you have designed those things. So project 3A is a part of project 3. So on next week, so if I go to the calendar, project 3 is, so there is no project 3 on next week, is because next week you'll have the midterm. So if you go to the June calendar, you can see the project 3 is due on Tuesday after the midterm. That means week after you design. So when you design this project on next Tuesday, that can be, so using this design, you can develop this responsive website. Again, our grader is really too fast, so he can grade your design within 1 or 2 days after you submit. So you will get some feedback. with those feedback, you can design, like develop a project. And make sure next week you have the midterm exam. I will post another video next week so that you'll have some idea what's inside the midterm, what are the syllabuses, and so on and so forth. So I'm not discussing about the midterm right now. Let's talk about a little bit about the project 2. So you have already done the About Me project. This is the HTML. For the CSS, for the project 2, you have to add the CSS with your project 1. So it is like consecutive progression. So project 1 is like doing something, project 2 is adding some more thing with the project 1, and so on and so forth. And this week, you have like 3 labs in the JavaScript, and you can read those things. It's the 5A, I think, but it is in the chapter 4. Don't worry. And the chapter 4, so like week 4. So if I go to the Zybook, you can see here. This is very important is because you know, JavaScript is like really some programming in web languages. So HTML and CSS are, I do not call them programming languages. Rather, I can tell it or identify it as a, what it called, like there is no logic, there is no exact syntax for those things, but there are syntax. But if you're missing any syntax, you will not get any error. Rather, those cannot be shown. But in case of JavaScript, if you're writing something that is an error, then definitely you'll not get the expected result. So this is the JavaScript chapter, chapter 4, part A. On your module is like module 5, part A. So you need to read those things and those labs. So if you go to here, this is the very basic things and the syntax and variables of the JavaScript. So there are various types of data type: string, number, Boolean, array, object, undefined, and now. Then some arithmetic operation, how you can add, multiply, subtract. This is the modulus. Like if you're adding 4 modulus 2, it is giving you the reminder. So modulus operator is very famous and important operator. Then some exponent, how you can increment, decrement the variables. For example, if you're adding x equal x plus 1, you are adding 1 with x, you can write x plus plus. Similarly, if you do decrement, you can write x minus minus. Then the conditional. So I think if you have learned some programming languages like Python, Java, or C or C++, in all other languages, they have some conditional operator. We call it like if statement. So there's some condition. Based on this condition, those statements can be evaluated. And there's a multiple if statement or if else statement, if else if statement. So you can read those things and do those operator, do those the assignment. So whenever you are evaluating the expression, you will use some comparator. We can call it a comparison operator. Similarly, like equality, inequality, identity, not identity, less than. This is the very common things: less than, equal, greater than, equal. Based on those comparison, we can evaluate whether it is true or false. There are some nested if else, as I told you, that if inside an if, and make sure those braces can be aligned. Like for these ifs, this is the starting brace, this is the ending brace. So this is the else starting brace, this is the else ending brace. Inside this else, there are a lot of if else. So this can call as a nested if else. And this is if else if. So there are multiple if. So if this condition is not satisfying, it goes here. If it is not satisfying, it goes here. If it is satisfying, it is not checking the rest of the other ifs. Then there's some more conditional operator like truthy or falsy. This is very important for your exam and for your understanding. So for an example, like a 0, if you're writing if 0, so that means 0 is a false value. 0 means false, 1 means true. If there's an empty, it's like a false. If it's like a NAND, it's a false value. So you will learn what are the false values, what are the true values. And there's some switch case statements. Switch case is very common in C, C++, in Java, but in Python, don't know. Yeah, in Python, we're not using switch. So switch is like you're sending an item, it is checking each of those cases, whether it is satisfying or not. For example, if the item is an orange, so it's checking with the apple, it is not an apple. It goes to the next one. And if it is an orange, then it enters in that block and executes those statements. And if you're not writing break, it will continue checking again and again. So for switch cases, you need to write the break statement, whether you are done with your statements. Loops is a very important thing. So basically there are 3 loops: while loop, do while loop, and a for loop. So basically 2, while loop and for loop. While loop is like so in a for loop is like a definite loop. Definite means we know that how many times we need to iterate. For the while loop, it is not definite. That means based on the condition, this executing the statements again and again and again. Whether when the condition is not satisfying, then it exits from the loop. For example, if you're writing while 1, that means true, and writing something here, that means this loop will be an infinite loop. That means it will run again and again till the end of the world. So make sure you will avoid those infinite loops. So for example, in these cases, starting I with 1, and the condition is like, unless and until the I is less than or equal 4, it is doing those operations. So at the first time, the I value is 1, printing I, then I is incrementing. Now on the next iteration, I value is 2, 2 is less than 4, it is true. Then they executing these things, and that one too. Now I value is 3, 3 is less than 4, it is true. Then executing this one, executing that one. That means now it is incrementing 3 plus 1, 4. 4 is less than equal 4. Yes, it is true, is because less than or equal. And it is printing that value, incrementing the I. Now the I value is 5. So 5 is less than equal 4. No, it is not true. That means the condition is not satisfying. So we can break from this loop. So it will print out a down. So you can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, but it is not printing 5. Then another, so I have already told you do while loop. So the difference between the while loop and do while loop is, in case of a while loop, it is checking the condition, and if it is true, it executes those statements. In a do while loop, it is executing first, then checking the condition. That means it's like even if the condition is not satisfying, it is printing these things, at least for one time. So for the first time, whatever it is printing these things. and then checking whether the condition is true or false. If it's false, then it's exiting. If it is not false, that means true, it is going again and again. So in case of a false statement for the first time, at least we have one execution of the do while loop, like doing something, then checking. And for the while loop, checking something, then if it is true, then go to the inner block. The third type of loop is the for loop. As I have told you, for loop is like a definite loop. That means we know that how many times we need to iterate. So it should be an initializer or initialization, then a condition to satisfy, and the final expression. So so for the for loop, we know that for example here I is 1, I is less than 4, I plus 12. That means we know that this loop will run at most 4 times. But in case of a while loop, we don't know how many times it will run. And that's why for loop is called definite loop. So this is very important, looping. Then function is like how you can writing your code in a clean way so that you can reuse it through some function. So if you write some function with some name, then you can call that function through some parameter. Parameter is like you can pass some value from the function call, and those value can be used here inside the function. Okay. There are some basic function that we have used, some arrow function. Scope in the global object. So scope is really important because whenever you are declaring a variable, you need to know that whether it has a local scope or the global scope. For an example, if we are defining a variable inside a function, I think here's the, so for example, this value, like x, let me make it very simple, like a local and global. For example, you are writing a variable inside a function. You cannot use that variable outside of the function. That means the scope of that variable is inside that function. Therefore, the variable scope is local. Locals mean like it is inside that function. If you are defining some variable outside of the function so that you can use those variables maybe inside the function or some other places. And those type of variable scope is like a global scope. So you can read those things to know what is a global and local variable and how you can maintain their scopes. Array is really an important data structure because a variable contains only one values, but an array can contain multiple value. For example, if you need to list a lot of numbers, for example, list of students, list of teams, list of animals, or whatever it is. So for example, we have like 100 students. So if we are using a normal variable, we need to declare 100 variables, right? 100 students' name. It is not convenient. Instead, we can use an array. Maybe we can make the size of the array is like 100. And within one array, we can just list 100 items, 100 students' name or their score within one variable. So that's why the array is really an important data structure. You need to learn those things here to work with some basic functionality or basic operation. So there are some examples. So and some built-in methods. You need to know how you can use those built-in methods with an array data structure. The next one is the object. So object is basically object-oriented concept, but in JavaScript, we can define a lot of objects. One of them is like a string object, but forget it about the string object. Here, we're defining some objects. For example, like book is an object. It could have many properties. For example, book has the title, some publisher. It should have some keyword, maybe some published date, and so on and so forth. So when we're defining an object in JavaScript, we can define this way, and we can call the properties. So these are the properties of this object. We can call the property of this object through the dot operator. So book is an object. We can call the title of the book through the book dot title. So title is the property. And there's some operation here. There's some getter and setter method to set and get the value of those objects property. Okay. Then the maps. Maps is just mapping. So if we are calling, so for example, we're just writing an array of all state capitals, and if we'd like to find some capitals, for example, like what's the capital of Utah? So we need to traverse from A to U and find, okay, this is the Utah and its capital is Salt Lake City. Rather, we can use some other data structures which are called map. To the map, we don't need to traverse the whole array. Rather, we can just get Salt Lake City using some key. What is the key? Key could be like our state short name, like UT. If we just search, okay, what is UT? What's the value of the UT? UT is the key, for example, and it will return Salt Lake City with one call. But in case of an array, we need to traverse the whole array to find the capital of state. So maps is really important, which saves some time. And map should have key and the associated value. For example, here you can see this is the map state capitals. So key is the AR, value is the little rock, so on and so forth. So if we can call that up, okay, what is the value of this key? So this is the map, and we're calling this value through CO. It will return Denver in one shot. So sometimes we'll be using the map object, and it has those default properties of functionality. You can use those things. You need to learn those default functionality, how you can use those default ones. And I have told you of the string object before. So a string is a specific type of object. So you can see here, like I love JavaScript JS, and each of the item is like a character. So I is a character, then the second character is like space, third character is L, and so on and so forth. So we can iterate this string object using some for loop or some other way. And one of the greatest usable method is like character add. So if you write string.character add, that means it will search that item. For example, I'm just searching whether so I would like to find the number of characters, for example, or number of spaces here. So we can search, okay, I'm searching from string 0 to the length of the string, and I'm searching if the character at this point, 0, that means 0 index, is a space, we're just integrating, okay, that many spaces. And finally, you'll see, okay, there are like 2 spaces. You can see here 1 space here and 2 spaces here. So there are a lot of methods using the string object and string operation. You'll learn those things from here. So there are some built-in methods, index of, last index of, replace, a lot more. Yeah, there's some built-in function like to uppercase, to lowercase, make upper, make lower. Yeah, substring. You can find the substring from the string. Then you can skip the string, make it lower, make it upper. You can trim the string, so maybe there are some spaces before or after. You can write the built-in method like trim. It will just trim the spaces before and after of some characters. So you need to learn those things whenever you like to use the string objects. We'll be using this string object more often. The date object is really important to portrait your date, portrait the date. So you can just show in different format. For example, like this format. I'm not sure. Yeah. There are like a lot of formats here. Like, oh, okay. So for example, you would like to write the whole thing, Thursday, April 18, 2019, exact time, GMT, or whatever the time zone is. Maybe you can write, okay, it could be 4/18/2019, or maybe you would like to know only the day, whether it's Thursday or Friday or Saturday. Maybe you'd like to know the month or the date or the time zone. So there are some methods to get those things. Like if you use the get date, you will get the date of this, date of the month. If you get day, it will give you the day of the week. Then the hours, it will give you the hours from 0 to 23. You can get those things through the millisecond, get the minutes, and so on and so forth. Okay. Math object is really important for your mathematical calculation. So maybe you like to find the radius of a circle. So how would you like to do these things? What is the radius of a circle? So radius of a circle is the pi r square, right? So pi is a constant value, 3.1416. And what is the r square? How you can write the r square? You can write r multiply r, or you can use some math functions from the math objects. So I'm not sure, yeah, it's the power function. If you write 2 power of 3, it will give you 8. So if you write r comma 2, that means it is like the r square. So for your circle calculation, pi r square, you can write pi multiply math.pow r comma 2. That means r to the power 2. So you can write those things in a math function. And there are some important things like absolute value, ceiling, flooring, find the cos, log value, sine value, finding the square root, and so on and so forth. You need to know what are the function name whenever you need to do some operations. The exception handling is really important to avoid some errors. So sometimes you'll see on some website that 505 error or data is not showing or some other things. Whenever you're writing some program in Python or some other languages, if you have any error, it will just throw some error. Okay, this is the error. For example, the very common error is like divide by 0. If you're dividing something by 0, you will get some error. And whenever there's some exception, like an error, the next onward lines are not executed. So to avoid these things, for example, you have an error, but you would like to execute the rest of the code, then you can use the exception handling. You can handle the exception. So how do you do that? So it is called like a try and catch. You would like to try something, like for example, you would like to divide 4 by 0. That means it is an error. So in a normal case, you will get some error and it will not pass to the next line. It will not execute the next lines. But if you use the try and catch, if you write those things in a try block, and it is an error, it will go to the catch block. That's because this is an error. So I'll give you some example here. For example, this line, like, okay, your starting index should be at least 0, but if you're passing the starting index is less than 0, so you're just writing, okay, throw this exception that this is a less than 0. So you will go to here. Sorry, if it is less than 0, you throw some exception. That means it will not work, but like, it is certainly an error, but you can proceed with some other lines. Let me show you if there's some good example. Okay, maybe you can write something here. For example, this I'm writing I'm writing in a Python coding. So a variable value is like val is like 4, for example. And I'm trying to divide the val equals val divided by 4. We can write those things like this way. Whatever it is. So it is an error. Whenever I accept, maybe printing something, okay. Value or divide by 0. Okay, so we're trying to divide something by 0. So it is invalid. Therefore, it goes to the except block and print this line. Okay, there's some divide by 0, of course. So what happens if you're not writing find catch? Maybe I'm writing here another line like print done. So this is one case, and another case is this without the try block. Okay, what happened? In this case, the output should be printing this line, and then the next line is done. Okay, but in this case, the output should be an error. Okay, why it will show you an error? Is because it is trying to divide by 0 and it got some exception. So since it got some exception, the compiler is not going to process the next line. So it shows the error and that's it, halt from here. In this case, it is trying to divide, but it got some exception, but it's trying to find, okay, do we have an exception handling thing here? Okay, we have. So it's printing here. So we're done with the exception handling, then print that done. So this is the difference between using try, like exception handling things and not handling the exception. If you're handling the exception, you can execute the whole program by handling the exception. But if you're not handling, then you're not going to execute the whole program. So the best option is like handling the exception in the industry. So even if you have an error, you can show the other blocks. So that's why the exception handling is really important in web languages. So you will learn a lot more things here, how you can do the exception handling. And that's all for the this JavaScript chapter. And I would like to give you some reminder. One important thing is like, most likely you will have some deadline on Saturdays. And I found some of the students emailing me in the Saturday morning that they are facing some problem. You know, Saturday is the weekend. Maybe I may not check the emails in weekdays, in weekends. but I often check my emails in weekdays. So it's better to email me in the weekdays so that I can respond to you within the next day. But if it is like a weekend, I may not reply within the same day or the next day. So I found many of the students, they have just emailed me before the deadline, and they're expecting to finish, like expecting to get a response from me within the same day, but sometimes it is not possible for me. So I would suggest you to email me beforehand, like at least on the weekdays, so that I can check your query and see if there's some solution. I can provide the, not the solution, the resolution of your query. So do not email me on the very last day, and do not start working on a project on the very last day. And I know it is really hard for you to cope up with those all assignments within very short time, but you know, it's a 7.5 weeks course, so you have to put more effort to finish those things. Okay, thank you very much. So if you have any question, so send me a message in the Canvas or in Teams, or send me an email. I will try to get back to you as soon as I can, but not likely some week ends. Make sure you send me emails or messages on weekdays, and do not send me email on the very last day for those projects or assignments. Hopefully, I will capture another video next Monday or Tuesday about midterm and all other things. Till then, goodbye. Thank you.